My name is Brittany, and this is my presentation on my special project. And today I'm going to be talking about the art of backstory. So, let's get in. Okay, so what is backstory? It's a very simple definition. This is my definition. I describe backstory as it's the past events of a character or setting that occurred before the story. The descriptions and dialogue gives hints to these characters. So, a quick note about backstory is your story doesn't have to start up front with the past events. In some cases, people do have prologues where they give a little bit of what the backstory is, but in a lot of cases, there isn't an upfront, full description of your backstory, which is fine. That is key. Actually, a lot of authors recommend they don't they recommend not doing that. Instead, they recommend to weave in the past history through your hints and clues throughout the story. You could briefly mention it in your narrative description, your body language, your dialogue, and flashbacks. Backstory is kind of like, your secret recipe in your cooking. It's there, but it's also not there. It's not fully in your face. You slowly and weave it throughout the recipe. So, this is what I call my backstory skeleton. This is a little way to imagine backstory in your story. So, as you imagine a body, we have our skeleton, then we have our nervous systems, and then we have our muscles, and then everything else. So, when you think of backstory, think of it as the skeleton. You can't see it in your story, but it's still there constructing certain aspects. So, it's constructing certain narrative elements, such as character development, tropes, perspective, foreshadowing. So I'll go into how this works. So with the backstory, how it works with character development is when you're starting your story, you're starting at a specific point in time in your character's life. If it's not the beginning, then it's somewhere between. And so, because of that, your character has a backstory or a past that the readers don't know of. So, throughout the story, you could have the character changing and growing into a different person by using their backstory, by using, oh well, this event happened in their past, it was really traumatic, and this is why they are the person they are now, and this is how they're growing. And this is how you can use backstory in a really great way to show how the obstacles you're putting your character through conflicts with their backstory and how it's turning and changing their personality. And so going into tropes, I'll actually leave that for later because we will be talking about tropes a little bit later. And then perspective goes key with backstory because if you're like people, when we go through certain things in life, we have a certain perspective. If you grew up wealthy, then you're going to have a different perspective than a person who didn't grow up wealthy. It's all about these different characteristics and how we are in society that will cultivate our perspective. So this is where backstory is really key and how your character views the world around them and the obstacles they're going through. And then with foreshadowing is a little bit I don't know if it goes like hand in hand, but in my personal opinion, I see as backstory and foreshadowing are two different spectrums of it. So you have backstory, which is the past, and then foreshadowing, which is hinting at the future. But you still need the middle. So with backstory, you can use it as like for example, if somebody comes back from your character's past, you will use that backstory to then foreshadow them. Like, oh, I remember that hat they wore, or oh, I remember that laugh. Using those subtle hints and cues to trigger what's going to happen now in the future. So it's small things that backstory contributes to. That's why I call it a skeleton, because it's small bones that you wouldn't really see or think about, but they still are integral pieces of the story. Now, how does backstory connect to other characters? Now that we have gone a little bit into depth about how backstory affects the character, the main character, the individual, we're going to see how it connects when you put other characters in it, when you put your friends and your romantic partners. Like, how does backstory come play into that? So, this is where we get backstories and friendships and romance. So, backstory in friendships and romances. So, basically, when you have a friendship and it's not starting from the beginning of the story, like you didn't introduce the character in the beginning, not the beginning, sorry, that's not what I meant. it's not like, you know how when you read a story and it introduces the friend, like this is the friend your character has never met before, and we see the relationship grow. These wouldn't really apply to that because we're watching the relationship grow in real time, in present time. But if this is a friendship that is already in the main character's backstory or history, then these tips or these little things will apply. So with this past friendship, you really want to center on the moments in past. These are integral. The flashbacks, the dialogue, the descriptions. These, because the reader doesn't have a full point description of the backstory, these little flashbacks or these little moments or treasures are really going to cement their friendship. It's really going to show, oh, what have they been through? Oh, what connects them? And this is really going to be beneficial to build that realistic notion of their friendship. And this is going to weave into the show, don't tell, their bond. You want to show that their love for each other, how far they're willing to go for each other. You want to show the love that's in the friendship, but you don't want to tell it. You don't want to be like, oh, I love her, she's my best friend. You want to use like, oh, that one time in high school when my prom dress got ruined, she gave me her old dress. Like, you want to use these moments from the past to certify or it's kind of like you want to use it as like evidence that like, no, we're best friends, we're key. And then also banter, your dialogue is so it's so I don't know how to explain how important it is, because when you're writing your dialogue between friends, when you and your friend are talking, there's a certain cadence, there's a certain rhythm, like you've known each other for a while, so you really want to focus on like, why are they friends? Focus on your main characters. I call it baggage. When you have all your backstory together, what they've been through, that's their baggage. And then you also want to like go into and dive into the friend or the side character's baggage, what they've been through, how has that affected their personality? And then that will connect to you why they're friends. Why do they click? How are they able to go back and forth? Because you're able to see how they're able to meet in the backstory. Okay, now we're going to move on to romance. So, most of these tropes, most of the things that I applied to friendship applied to romance. But we're going to dive a little deeper and see it in a more romantic situation. So, with romance, like I said in the beginning of friendship, if the story doesn't center on the beginning of the relationship, these apply. But if the story does center on the beginning of the relationship, these won't apply because you're basically already living the backstory. So, the first thing that applies is you want to establish the trope. The same thing involves with friendships, but it's not as important or as distinct as it is with romance. With romance, you want to establish the trope. Are they friends? Are they friends to lovers? Are they enemies to lovers? Are they like a one night stand to lovers? You want to figure out how they met so then it connects to that moment in past. If they were enemies to lover, you would have flashbacks of them arguing or them not liking each other, or that one time that they were in debate club and they were the enemy. You want to have these moments to then connect to how they are lovers now. We need to know. I keep wanting to say we need to know the backstory because that word just encapsulates everything I'm trying to say. But we need to know the details, the hints, those little subtle moments that really makes up their relationship. And to this, we're going to go out to calling out certain details. So how to say, when you have a backstory and you're presenting someone, or there's already history with someone, but the first time they're being presented to the story, this is where you can play with details. You can play with oh, their body language, or how much they really know about the main character, which is why I added favorites. Do they know the character's favorite color, favorite food, favorite perfume? I don't know, anything that's really minuscule details that someone that's been in their life known before. And so you can use these to also kind of foreshadow or show their love for each other, or the other characters' love for each other, because they know these certain details from the past. Oh, Brandon looked at her and said, "You're still wearing, that Victoria's Secret perfume from high school." Whoa, wait. like that kind of like subtle hint of you remember from high school and we're like 25 now. Like this is really key into making your like romantic interest like I don't know, like shine out, spark in this like back with while using those hints and clues a backstory. So this is really what I mean when I say like whenever you hear me say like hints or clues, I really mean these using your details, using your descriptions, using dialogue to kind of show, slowly put in the backstory. And next, you want to compare it to the present. Now, if you're having a story where it starts off they're already in a relationship, they're already married, but they're kind of like in the middle or they're going through a hard time, you kind of want to. It'd be great to compare it to compare it to the past. What I mean, like what happened in the past where they what am I trying to say? Were they goofy? Were they charismatic? Were they what was their relationship? What was the vibes like before everything changed? That way the reader has a compare and contrast situation by using like flashbacks or dialogue or something like that. It gives the readers a sense to compare and contrast what you're providing them, and that way they can tell, okay, this was a really romantic relationship, but then this happened. And maybe they're still in love, but you can tell. That's where the plot and stuff. I'm going different ways. I'm so sorry. I get carried away sometimes. But basically, this is a really good tool. If you want to add it, compare and contrast to the present. I would though be very careful. This is like a little secret sauce. I wouldn't use it too much, but at just the right time, at just the right moments throughout the story, it could really, especially if your story centers now, if your story centers around like divorced or heartbreak or that, then you would use this a lot more. But if it doesn't, I would use this sparingly because it's a really great tip to use, but it can also get overdone. And this is my little like thing of backstory. This is how I view backstory. I view it as a way to help build the emotional connection between the characters and the reader. When when you open up a book, this is like you're getting to know a person, you're having a conversation, you're seeing their life, you're seeing, the sci-fi, the fantasy, you're seeing them go through these things. But if you take away all the sci-fi and the fantasy and even the like plot, there's still a character, and it's still like a conversation between two strangers. And you know how when you talk to a stranger, you're always going to add context about yourself. You're always going to be like, oh well, I went to this school, or I had this one friend, or oh, I grew up in this town. And so backstory can very be key to building the relationship between your characters and readers, but also it could be a great way to show your readers how much your characters mean to each other, to show how much they're involved in their life, to show, the emotional connection, and not for your readers just to read, oh, they're friends. Like, oh no, there's more to that. There's more to the friendship. There's more to the girlfriend and boyfriend, the girlfriend and girlfriend, like boyfriend and boyfriend. Like, there's so much more to it, and this is where backstory can be key. So, here are some tips that I have like gathered throughout my life because I love contemporary. I love characters. I love writing about people, and this is why I chose backstory and talking about it as my special project because it's just so much fun. Like just it's really fun to just focus on the past, but also trying to focus on the present. Your story isn't about the past, so how do you slowly add the essence from the past into what's happening in the present? So here are some tips I gathered. So, one, observe how people talk or reminisce about their relationship. I realize once you figure out the cadence or how people bring it up, it kind of makes writing dialogue or even writing a narrative description easier because you're able to see, okay, how they slowly like intro, like you when you listen to people, you'll realize they're talking about the present, but then they'll go on tangents about the past. And that's where it's really key for you to see those transitions so you know where to add them into your backstory. And then the second, connect to your life experience. As writers, we all know writing is basically just another way to talk about your life experience, but kind of hide it. So connect to your life experience. If you have that one moment with your friends and that one inside joke, you could add that, well, not the actual inside joke, but you could add like the context or how the joke started to your characters to really show, the friendship. Or if you have that one romantic relationship, you can connect that to your character, or maybe a moment you had in that relationship. Like we don't always have to, I forgot what the quote is called, but like you don't have to recreate, I forgot what it's called. It's like you just don't recreate it. You can always go back to where it was, go back to when you experienced it. And then another, read contemporary or literary fiction. It might just be me because I love contemporary or literary fiction and I love when people read it, but I feel like contemporary literary fiction really focuses on the people, focuses on what happened, focuses on backstory really and what makes them a person. And then fourth, journal your emotions. Now, this is also just good for you, like overall in life. But with your characters, and when they think about the backstory and they think about their past, they'll also go through emotional reaction. They'll go through an emotional feeling. And even when it involves other people, friends, and romance, like if it didn't go well, or maybe it was like a traumatic moment in that friendship or that romantic relationship, you want to figure out how are you going to convey how your character reacted, what were those emotions. And it's, I find it's easier to talk about how your character reacted when you yourself can connect back to your own experience. So this is where you would journal your emotions, and once you flesh out your own emotions, it becomes an easier transition to then flesh out your characters. Okay, well, I should have added a thank you slide. My apologies, but I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching.